Thank you very much, Katie. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. For the benefit of any observers of ours watching on YouTube, members of the Cabinet are present in the chamber this evening, and it's these members who will be voting on proposals. We have other members who aren't in Cabinet in the chamber and online, and they can participate at invitation. Can I draw everyone's attention to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. Before we start the formal business, I shall just run through members of the Cabinet and the council officers in attendance today and ask them to introduce themselves. First, for those who don't know me, I'm Matt Borton. I am the Chair of Cabinet and of the Council. Turning to Cabinet members, if you can just introduce yourselves, starting with Robin Betts.
Yeah, hi there, Robin Betts, Cabinet Member for Climate Change, Regeneration and Property. Thank you.
Martin Coffin.
Martin Coffin, Cabinet Member for Transformation and Infrastructure.
Des Kears.
Good evening, everyone. Cabinet Member for Community Services.
Kim Tanner.
Good evening, everyone. Cabinet Member for Finance and Housing.
And Mike Taylor.
Good evening, Cabinet Member for Planning.
Thank you all. I'll now ask officers to introduce themselves, perhaps starting left with Damien.
Thank you, Leader. Damien Roberts, Chief Executive.
On the microphone. Good evening, Chair. I'm Adrian Stanfield, Director of Central Services.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Shelton, Director of Finance and Transformation.
Linda.
Hi, everyone. Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing and Health.
Jeremy.
Evening, everyone. Jeremy Whitaker, Strategic Economic Regeneration Manager.
Good evening, Paul Worden, Chief Financial Services Officer.
Evening, Stuart Edwards, Head of Administrative and Property Services.
Good evening, Dean Radmore, Umbridge Town Centre Programme Manager.
Victoria Freeman, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you all. And online we should have Robert Stiles. Robert, can you hear us?
Yes, good evening, Leader. It's Robert Stiles, Director of Street Scene, Leisure and Technical Services.
Thank you very much indeed. And if I can just ask other members to just introduce themselves when they speak, that would be very kind. Right, we'll now crack on with the agenda item proper. I referenced item 1 earlier. That is simply the ground rules. Item 2 is apologies for absence, but we have a full house, so no apologies. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any members of Cabinet got any interest to declare on any items? Lots of shakes of the head, so that's no. Agenda item 4 takes us back to our previous meeting, which is on the 3rd of September 2024. This is at page 15 of the agenda and is the minutes of those meetings. Can we please take those minutes as a correct record of the meeting? That's agreed unanimously, and I'll sign them shortly. Thank you very much. Right, our first substantive item of the agenda is agenda item 5. This starts at page 23 and is the key performance indicators for Q1. We have Jeremy Whitaker here, who's happy to introduce the report and answer any questions. So, Jeremy, do you wish to make any introduction?
Yep, thank you very much, Chairman. Yep, just a very short introduction given the agenda. I think I'll be relatively brief, but just to say this report just sets out the Q1 KPIs. For the organisation, sets out some good news and some areas of focus as set out in the report, but it also sets out some areas for review in terms of performance management and our KPIs. So, I mean, there's effectively 3. One is around the process with which the KPIs are reported. The second point is around reducing and consolidating the number of KPIs, but ensuring that we keep the quality that we monitor. And the third point is really around embedding the performance management organisation. Just one little bit of marking my own homework. I should point out that under 3.2, it should state referred to in 5.1 rather than 6.1, just for clarity. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Jeremy, thank you very much indeed. Just before we I go to other members, I think this is our first cabinet meeting since our new reports template was introduced. So what I'll do as normal at the start of each report is I'll just ask, obviously the author, in this case Jeremy, but otherwise the cabinet member and responsible officer, if they want to add anything. I'll then come, we always do, to members who aren't in the cabinet first. And if the rest of the cabinets mind waiting till the end of items, that would be great. I don't know, Damien, if you wish to add anything to what Jeremy said. All I would say is, from myself as the cabinet member responsible, is that there's some great progress in lots of areas right across the council, as Jeremy said, areas that we need to improve, but it's looking story. Any member who isn't in cabinet wish to comment on any of the KPIs? Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. I'm obviously not a member of your cabinet. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to pick up on a couple of the pertinent KPIs. 024 recycling and composting, which obviously show a drop in recycling rates, and beneath that is 029, which is the number of fly tipping incidents, which I think might be worth bearing in mind, coming up to what we might be talking about later in the evening.
Thank you, Mark. I don't think there was a particular question there, but obviously we can see those for ourselves. Any other comments? Members who aren't in cabinets? I don't have other hands. Outcome, cabinet members.
Thank you very much. Well, it's actually in reference with 024, 029, as it happens, particularly 029, where we've got the number of fly tipping incidents. I'm just about to issue a cabinet member decision for the people who enforce for fly tipping and so forth. And part of that is an incentive to the company. So I would sincerely hope that we see a drop in those numbers, and certainly an increase in the number of prosecutions that we are able to take forward. So in that respect, I think we've got a positive direction of travel. And with the recycling and composting, there are campaigns which are now being run to try to increase our rates of recycling and composting to a much higher level. And I think it's fair to say that we would like to be as high as we can, given the methodology that we have for our collection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Des?
Thanks, Chair. Couple of points, if I may. Great to see the numbers visiting our leisure facilities going up by 8% from this time last year. So that's obviously working very well. But regarding antisocial behaviour, I just want to clarify the fact that the reports that we see before us in our KPIs are those reported to this local authority. I can affirm to people that the borough has in fact 11.9% reduction, as well as a 6% reduction in all crime. So that's 9% of ASB, 6% all crime. And we are still very much right at the bottom of the league table, which is where we want to be when it comes to volume crime. So we are doing very, very well. We've pretty much brought on our reporting ourselves because of the antisocial behaviour enforcement team, the engagement, the accessibility that we've done with that team. And we're in a really, really good place. So just wanted to clarify that for people.
Thank you, Des. Mike?
Thank you very much. I think this is a good news story, and I'm glad to see it. I do agree with the idea of reducing the number of KPIs, because we're in danger of avalanching people with information, and this is definitely a case where less is more, provided we keep the transparency. Thank you.
Very timely you mentioned that, Mike, because Jeremy, Damien and I were doing that just the other day. And as it's referenced in the reports, how we report KPIs will change with much more focus on actually the outcomes strategy. Actually, some of the KPIs which will be kept in going forward are those which actually focus on do show that trend. So yeah, changes are afoot in terms of how we report KPIs, but I'm pleased that, as you say, generally a very good news story. Jeremy, just for those recommendations, is there anything you want to pick up there, or if not?
No, I mean, really just in terms of, for example, I think this is obviously the end of reporting Q1. We are already starting to report Q2 to the scrutiny select committees, and there is some positive news in terms of the direction of travel with recycling. Off the top of my head, 51%. So that's just an added bit of positive news on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeremy. I'll just go to page 23 where we have the recommendations. I won't read them out in full, but just to read the targets associated with the KPIs at 6.1 and also the solutions at section 7. I'm happy to move to the chair. Do I have a seconder? Martin? Sorry? Yes. Sorry, important correction there. Thank you. Can we agree that? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeremy, for all your work on this too, and enjoy your evening. Right, we shall now move on to agenda item 6, which is the Treasury Management Update and Mid-Year Review. This has come from the Audit Committee's meeting of the 23rd of September. We have 2 recommendations on page 47. Again, I won't read them out because everyone can see them. Do I have any members who aren't in Cabinet who wish to comment on recommendations of the Audit Committee? Don't see any hands. Cabinet members, any comments? Kim?
Just really want to say that we're very lucky that our Treasury management is still managing to bring in good returns on our investments, and work continues. We're lucky that we are lucky that interest rates are higher. Not everybody would agree that that's a good thing, but for us, it's working and paying dividends to keep our head above water. So really grateful to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mike?
Thank you very much. I'm not a complete numpty when it comes to accounting because I ran my own haulage company for 30 years. But I must admit, a lot of Sharon and Paul stuff goes straight over the top of my head. The table on page 59, where we list our investments and the returns on those investments, is there anything to stop us borrowing our own money if we need to borrow for Tunbridge Town Centre regeneration and those sort of projects? Are we allowed to do that?
Yes, we can do that. There is a certain requirement that we have to do a return on that as well. So it's known as internal borrowing, and it is very, very complex, and it's sometimes over my head, and I've got 2 staff that deal with this for me. So we can do it, and it is known as internal borrowing. So we have to make a return back on that to ensure that monies that we have taken out of our reserves can be put back in. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mike. I don't see any other hands. This is a recommendation to council. Again, I'm happy to propose from the chair. Do I have a seconder that we, thank you, Martin, I think you were there first, that we can commend the 2 recommendations from Audit Committee to council? Agree that? Or mess? That's agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to our executive key decisions at agenda item 7, starting with an amendment to the housing allocations scheme on page 71. Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing here. Linda, do you wish to add anything to the report to start with?
Just to highlight that obviously the current housing allocation scheme has been play for over a year now, and obviously when you use a scheme you realise that you need tweaks and changes, and this is basically what these recommendations are about, engaging with our RP partners on the proposed amendment, and then delegating responsibility to the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health in consulting Cabinet Member for Finance and Housing to agree a final scheme. Changes are highlighted in paragraph 5.2, and the annex I've highlighted the areas that we're proposing to make amendments.
Thank you, Linda. Kim, do you wish to add anything?
Thanks, Matt. All I can say is that, as Linda said, it is a review of a fairly new policy, and these amendments will just make our working life more efficient, and it's just things that we've found that are leading us to dead ends, so it just enhances the service that we can give on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I'll now come to members who aren't in cabinets. Do they have any comments on the amendments? See any? Any other cabinet members wish to comment? In which case, again, I'm happy to move if I can have a seconder. Kim, thank you. Right, these are the two recommendations at 3.1. I won't read 3.1 out because there's lots of elements to it. And 3.2 gives that responsibility to Eleanor Hoyle in her role in consultation with Kim to agree the final scheme, the engagement phase has been considered. Can we agree that collectively? Lovely. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Linda, too. There's some very important changes in there which will hopefully help our residents, which I'm very grateful. Right. Agenda item 8. This is the recommendation from the Communities and Environment Scrutiny Select Committee of the 6th of November in respect of fees and charges. This was circulated as a supplement due to that meeting happening after the meeting of the agenda of this meeting being published. There are 12 recommendations, which you'll all be delighted I will not read or go through individually. Any member who isn't in Cabinet wish to comment on any of the recommendations from the committee? Mark Hood.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'm still not a member of your Cabinet, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I didn't attend the meeting of the Communities and Environment Scrutiny Select Committee. I was very surprised to see that the recommendation in the papers was amended, and that the recommendation is to increase the garden waste charge from £53 to £63, which I think is an extreme measure. When the garden waste charge was introduced, it was established that it is actually tantamount to a garden tax, because it wasn't required to cover the cost of the contract. When it was brought in, it was entirely a revenue making measure. So the previous contract came in, and it was negotiated at such a level that it didn't require, as I recall, it didn't require, and I did clarify this with the Cabinet member at the time, it didn't require a charge for garden waste, but the council, the administration decided to levy that charge. So I believe it was about £40 when we brought it in, and it's escalated, and gone up and gone up. And I understand that the council needs to increase charges, and I understand that we have got issues projected where we expect government settlements to decrease. However, I'm not sure that we are looking at this in the right way. I think my colleague, Councillor Pilgrim, asked for the council to consider actually having a reduction for some members, for some residents who are in receipt of certain benefits. That can be done quite simply, because we already give a reduction in the bulky waste collections for people who are in receipt of council tax bonus or whatever it is. So we know it can be done, and we also know that other councils can take other benefits into account, because South Gloucestershire does that, Nottingham Council does that. It reduces the cost of garden waste collection if residents receive council tax. Brent Council, they offer a 20% reduction, and Cheshire also, Bracknell and Basildon. So we know that this is achievable. And what I'd like to know is there any evidence available to us to actually clarify whether if we offered this service to residents who are on a lower income at a reduced rate, would we actually get more people taking us up on the offer, and could that actually bring in more money, more revenue in total, and would that in turn increase our recycling levels for this waste? Because we all know that this waste, garden waste, is cheaper to process than than the normal black bin waste. I think we all know, we're all realistic. We all know that residents are actually putting their garden waste in their bins rather, and it's going into the system and being incinerated, which costs not only this council but the disposal authority a lot more money. And I think there's a bit of chicken and egg, carrot and stick, not chicken and egg, carrot and stick here. I think if the council had a more holistic view of its charging mechanism and enforcement, and we actually did a bit of spot checking on what goes in those bins, then we could be in a situation where we get our recycling rates up. We do the right thing for the environment, because that incinerator at Allington is one of the worst in the country, and we could actually increase revenue for the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. There's a few other hands. Lee Athwell.
Yes, thank you so much for letting me speak, not a member of the Cabinet, obviously. Similarly, I was just wondering, I saw that the tendency is down on people taking us up on the brown garden waste subscription, not by a huge amount, but it seems to be a sort of little bit of a downward trend. And I wondered at what point, if this increase puts people off, at what point will we actually be making less money than we were before, and whether there is something we can do to incentivise people to do this properly. Because similarly, I'm just worried that if you can't afford a brown bin, you haven't got a car to take things over to the dump. I just worry that people will see garden waste not as a really bad thing to fly tip. Do you know what I mean? People are going to think, well, it's only grass or whatever, and we might see an increase in fly tipping that way. So I'm just a bit concerned about those people that will struggle with this increase, because it's quite significant, an extra tenner, sort of percentage-wise, it's quite a big increase. And I'm wondering if we could do anything a bit cleverer just to encourage people to do the right thing with their garden waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. James Clokey.
Thank you. Also not a member of the Cabinet. Just to pick up on that previous point, this is quite a large increase in the fee, and we know that previous increases in fees have had a relatively modest effect on resubscription rates, but this is quite a big increase, and it's coming at a time when people are really feeling the pinch. So I wanted to know what have we done to try and find out from other comparable authorities what their experience is of making similar increases on new subscription rates and resubscription rates. Do people seem relatively price sensitive or insensitive on this?
Thank you, James. Mark Rhodes.
Chairman, thank you. I'm not a member of your Cabinet. I would remind members that are questioning this, especially Councillor Hood, that once upon a time we didn't even collect green waste from the garden. So what people did then, they would probably have to do if they decided to get rid of their bin now. But taking an average, and a basic average, a trip to the tip cost me, actually, I worked it out, cost me £1.82 to go and come back. It's 12.4 miles. The car does an average of 42 miles a gallon. Petrol's about 14.7 pence a mile. So 26 times, that's 47.39. Now, I appreciate there's a difference between 63 and 47, but the 47.39 doesn't include arranging the car, loading the car, time over there, unloading the car, queuing up, and then driving back. So £63 for 26 collections is pretty good value for money, really. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mark. I don't see, I'll come to you in a moment, Mark, because then you want to second bite of the cherry. But before I do, Robert Stiles, did you want to reflect on any of the comments you've heard? Then I'll bring in members for a second time. And I've also seen Granny Hoskins at hand. So, Robert.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think the first thing to say is that, as with all our charges, we've looked at a number of different principles which members have agreed in the past and apply to any review. And also to re-emphasise the fact that we are currently the second lowest in Kent in terms of our garden waste charge. And with the increase, proposed increase to £63, that will put us basically the average for the county. Most importantly, though, the report that was presented to the Select Committee did highlight the projected significant increase in our contract costs looking forward when we retender the contract. And the option was to look at opportunities to generate additional income here, rather than look at potential cuts in the contract specification. And that was a key issue on the night that was talked through and presented to members. I think it's always important to know that this is a service that is a choice for our residents. There are alternatives, which Councillor Rhodes has already talked about, some issues around those. And from an opinion would be that at £2.31 per collection from your literally from outside your front door, the proposed charge does offer good value for money. In terms of looking at any predicted sort of price sensitivity and whatever, we have had increases in the past. They haven't produced a significant drop off. We haven't consulted with other councils, but we feel that that the drop off will not be significant, bearing in mind the value for money that will still be retained in the proposals brought forward. Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much. If anyone else not in Cabinet wishes to speak, please do put your hand up. And just before I go to you, Franny, I'd just like to underscore a point Robert made around the costs of the waste contract in that report and the need that we've got certainly soon, preferably as soon as possible, to either look at increasing the income through this contract or looking at changes to the specification. So perhaps, Franny, you'd like to comment on that.
Thank you. Yes, again, I'm not a member of your Cabinet, but I am a member of the community board that set this rather bizarre rise, which was even more than the rise that officers proposed, which was already 13%. I'd just like to point out, Mark Rhodes talked about the cost of taking stuff to the tip, and that's precisely the reason why some of us fear an increase in fly tipping. Because if you can't afford to go to the tip and you can't afford to to hire a bin from us, you can fly tip. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean bunging your stuff in a car and driving somewhere. It could mean using a wheelbarrow and wheeling it round the corner. And we do know that this does happen in some places already. If you've only got a small garden and you don't have your waste collected every single time, then it's not a cost of £2.31 per collection, because you might not have a collection every single time. I mean, I've got a large garden, but I still don't have it collected every fortnight as I'm entitled to. So the figures are somewhat misleading. And as I say, I'm not quite sure how and why we proposed at Communities Environment an even larger increase than the one that was proposed in the papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Franny. Mark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm still not a member of your Cabinet. I'm not quite sure why this item is the subject of such hilarity, but the when we were here, I decided to speak again as I was mentioned by another member. I'm afraid because of the acoustics of the sound system in here, I couldn't catch entirely what Councillor Rhodes was getting at in the early part of his contribution. However, the point was made at the scrutiny meeting, and it was a fair point, that actually a lot of our residents, they can't actually get to the tip because they haven't got a car, and this goes back to the subject matter that I raised earlier. it's about making sure that the people who are least able to pay have actually got an option here. And the same goes for the increases to the for the bulky waste. Now we got rid of the bulky waste, and we had the same arguments about people can get their stuff to the tip. Well, that isn't always the case. In that case, we brought in an adjustment to the pricing system, and I think that's exactly what we should be doing to the garden waste as well. Other parallels were made at the scrutiny committee meeting about people being able to buy cups of coffee and people being able to valet their cars. These aren't the people we're trying to protect. The people we are supposed to be representing, or the people we are supposed to be paying most attention to, is those people who can least afford to pay these charges. So I would urge the cabinet to think again about that massive increase. And it would be great, actually, if it's not going to happen this year, let's do a little bit of research. Let's have a look and see what's possible, and see if we can actually increase those recycling rates going forward by looking at best practice elsewhere.
Thank you, Mark. I don't see any other hands, in which case thank you all for your contributions. I'll now come to cabinet members. Martin, this is your portfolio, so do you wish to speak first?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I think we're looking at this through the wrong end of the telescope. I really do. This is a service that we're providing to people with gardens. So it's an opt-in service. If people want to have the waste collected, they can opt in to have the waste collected. So I don't characterize this as a garden tax in the slightest bit. I characterize this as us looking in a commercial manner at a problem that people have, and we are solving it by providing a service. So I don't quite understand where garden tax comes from. Anyway, if you've got a garden, then there is a likelihood that you are able, possibly, and I'm not making too many generalizations, but you'll probably have a fairly significant area and a fairly significant house that goes around it. And I will accept that small gardens might be different. Composting is always available. You don't have to take the waste away from the garden. We compost quite a lot of our stuff in our garden, but we also have 3 brown bins to take the residue away. So, everyone has a need. I think there was a message about putting garden waste into black bins. Well, the loaders, I think that is the technical term for the people at the back, do actually inspect. And if they see garden waste, which is obviously in a black bin, then it's either not collected or there is a message left for the house owner to prevent that behaviour. So it isn't a matter of fact that all the garden waste goes into black bins. It very much is controlled. There was a question about elasticity of demand, if I remember my economics correctly, and that the demand is, largely speaking, inelastic. Those who wish to have this service will, largely speaking, want to buy the service. And of course, we've looked at percentages of increase, which is always an interesting one when you come to very small figures. 53 to 63, yes, it's a large percentage, but as a cost, I still think it's quite modest. And certainly when discussing this with people around me, not least of which is Mrs. Coffin, there isn't likely to be much of a problem with a price of £63, which I still represents very good value. I suppose looking at the commercial side of it, commercially, I think the waste collection is something like £25 to £30 a week, should you wish to have it collected commercially. So I really do think we're offering a service which is great value. We're not penalising people, we're offering a service. And I think we need to look at it through the right end of the telescope. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Mike?
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm not quite as affluent as Martin. I've only got 2 brown bins. But it is true that the sort of people who need a brown bin to dispose of their waste have enough land and probably enough property to be able to afford the service. And the idea of taking it to a tip, it's so easy to just walk at the end of the drive and it's gone, done with. But I think there's a couple of ideas that Mark has mentioned that are worthy of further exploration, and that is to find out if there are people who will be struggling with this increase, see if there's some way to discount their bins, and also whether it's worth exploring things, either a smaller bin, a cheaper bin, or groups of people amalgamated with one brown bin. I don't know whether that's something we could do from here or whether residents would have to organise it themselves, but there are ways around it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry, I was Damien and I were just agreeing there that one thing we could do, if demand does drop off the way some members have articulated tonight, is we can then use that, because we know exactly who they are, because they won't have renewed their subscription, to contact them to find out why they haven't renewed, and if the reason for that is due to financial difficulties and they're in receipt of certain benefits that we can sort of help with, then yes, we can put in place a scheme. But the reality is, at the moment, we don't know who they are, and that's something that we'd have to do post implementation if this charge is to be agreed. I don't see any other. Oh, Kim.
Thanks, Matt. I just really wanted to highlight the fact that we're not at £63. We're not too far out of kilter with other local authorities. And if I'm honest, I think we probably started the service too low in price, and that's why this is looking like a significant hike. And I think Mike's suggestion of clubbing together isn't a bad one. I actually share a brown bin with one of my neighbours. Kings Hill gardens are notoriously small, and a brown bin would never be filled in Kings Hill. So we share. It's in her name, but we share the cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Robin?
Thank you. No, it's just to add that the actual cost we're talking here per collection is 38p. That's what we're realistically talking about here. That's the increase on the current cost per collection. And when you're looking at 38p, I know the interest is a lot. The inflation side of it is higher, but the actual cost is 38p per collection increase. So it just sort of supports that it is a really good value service. And I did write in, just as you've just now mentioned it, we still have the ability to review the service. So, we can implement this increase of 38p per collection, but at the same time, we can still review how it works and if it can be improved. So that's probably how I'd leave it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we move to recommendations, I would just, personally speaking, comment on two things. I lived many years in a flat, including in Tunbridge and Morley when this was introduced, and I remember lots of arguments at the time being that this was outrageous. And I remember pointing out to folk that as someone living at the time in a second floor flat, I couldn't get a garden bin because I didn't have a garden. And subsequently, I think I thought it was then, and now I have a garden and a brown bin, and I still maintain this to be the case, which is actually this is not a universal service. So let's not pretend ourselves this is like collecting the general waste or the recycling at all. This is only eligible to people who have a garden. Therefore, it's absolutely right that there is a charge in place for a discretionary service. And my second point is, yes, we are looking at an increase of £10 a year. There are charges that are going to increase significantly. And the costs of the waste contract, as are referenced in the report, and I would urge members, and I appreciate members of the public can't see this, but we have a report to be considered in private later, which goes into quite some detail about the costs of the waste contract for this council. I would really encourage every single councillor to read that in detail. And I shall leave it there because we shall discuss that later. Right, we do also have 11 other charges that came from the Communities and Environment Scrutiny Select Committee that we haven't discussed, but I'm going to assume that there's general unanimity about them because I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So we've got, as I say, 12 in total. Again, happy to propose them from the chair. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Martin. I won't read them all out, and if we can take them on block, can we agree them collectively, Cabinet? They are agreed, all 12 charges from the Communities and Environment Scrutiny Select Committee. Thank you. Right, we now move on to page 131. This is our budgetary control report for September 2024. Sharon, do you wish to say something at the start?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We reported to you in September as well, and at that point, you probably won't remember, but there was a favourable variance then at that point in time of about 290,000. And rather strangely, we've got a very similar position in this report as well. It's now 296,000 as a positive favourable variance. As we discussed last time, there is an overspend on one significant service, which is obviously temporary accommodation, no different to many local authorities. The current overspend is 344,000 as at the end of September. And if you project that forward to the end of the year, that will be in excess of £500,000 overspend by then, if nothing else changed. Fortunately, as is demonstrated in the report, and actually as we've discussed earlier in this report, in this agenda as well, there are some things that are mitigating that particular overspend, and that's mainly Treasury management. For two reasons, really. One, we've had more balances to invest because we haven't been spending some of the capital costs, which we'll come on to in a minute. But the other side is that rates have remained higher than we had predicted at the start of the year and when we set the budget. Now, rates were cut last week, so things are starting to change, but that has held up our investment income very well and is helping to ease the position on the budget overall when we have some areas that are overspending. I mentioned capital spend, and there is a bit of a delay in spending some of the capital monies that we've got. One of the biggest projects we have for the current year is the Gibson building, this building, or actually the other building. That has been delayed. There'll be something coming forward on that very soon. I think the actual spend is going to slip probably into the next year. But the positive side of that for me is that we've had those balances to invest and earn interest, which is helping out our revenue budgets. There's always a silver lining. So that's as much as I wanted to say today. Paul's here as well, if any member has got any questions, but we are also taking this report to the Scrutiny Select Committee next week. So obviously we're very happy to take any questions at that point as well.
Thank you, Sharon. Tim, just to add anything to what Sharon said?
I need to thank the team for their continued diligence in budget control. They do a splendid job in making sure our finances are in a good position, and I, for one, am very grateful to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from members not in Cabinet? Don't see any. Have a Cabinet member? Nothing. That isn't to say, though, Sharon and Paul, you won't get anything next week at the Finance, Regeneration and Property Scrutiny Select Committee. So don't think you're off the hook quite yet. Right, we've got 4 recommendations. They are all to note. So can we note this report, please? Thank you. Right. Agenda item 10 starts at page 145. This is a recommendation that came from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 11th of September in respect of consultant use at the council. There are 6 recommendations that have come from the again, I'll ask members who aren't in Cabinet whether you've got any comments. I don't see any hands going up. Before Cabinet members, I invite you, can I just comment, I suppose, myself on one of the recommendations, the final one, around proposed consultancy spend in excess of 40,000 being reported to the relevant committee or Scrutiny Select Committee for consideration or approval. I appreciate Cabinet's comments on this, but I would just, before we move this, like to just understand a little bit more about sort of what that impacts, particularly in the context of our local plan work, for example, which obviously we've got a particular delay out of our control at the moment. So can I suggest to Cabinet, in fact, I'll move this from the chair, and if anyone wishes to second me, then you're welcome, that we move the first 5, but we don't move the 6th recommendation tonight, just pending to sort of further understanding about what that means in practice. Martin?
Happy to second that, pending further investigation. I think I am slightly concerned that we will lose our agility to a certain extent. I would like to know more. Thank you.
That isn't to say it's a bad idea, or that I, or speaking for myself, that I disagree with the recommendation from overview and scrutiny. I just think it's important that we understand in practice what that means. Say, particularly if we need to be agile around particular spends on projects such as agile. Since I mentioned it, we just need to sort of understand the full implications of that. Don't see any other comments. Mike.
Thank you very much. After group leaders today, there was a bit of a discussion about the listing on page 188, 89 and 90 referring to Borough Green Garden City. What's puzzled me about this for some time is the original Arcadis consultancy spend came from the Homes England grant, but the other ones below that don't say that. And I honestly don't understand the wording. Waiver extension to withdrawn local plan technical work. I mean, it doesn't have to happen now, but I'd appreciate some explanation of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I don't have Eleanor Hoyle or James Bailey here on that call, so I think it's probably best we pick that up outside the meeting, if that's okay. Just yeah, I'd rather give a correct answer separately than a wrong answer from the front, but point made and understood, and that's absolutely fine. Right. So I'm happy to move the first 5 recommendations. That's been seconded by Martin. We'll just keep the 6th recommendation back for the time being. So just for the first 5 recommendations, can we agree that collectively? That was agreed unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move on to page 207. This is risk management. Again, this has come from the Audit Committee of the 23rd of September 2024. There are 4 recommendations on page 208. I'm looking for comments from members who aren't in the Cabinet, and I don't see any hands that have shot up. I'm now looking at members in the Cabinet, and I don't see any hands that have shot up either. In which case, I will move the 4 recommendations on page 208. Could I have a seconder, please? Mike, thank you. Can we agree those collectively? They are agreed. Thank you very much. Agenda item 12 is next. This is another one from the Audit Committee in relation to the Auditor's Annual Report from 2022-23. I'm still looking for hands from members who aren't in the Cabinet, and I haven't seen any. And I'm still looking for hands from members in the Cabinet. I see one from Mike.
Thank you. One tiny point, if I may. Page 237, item 9, engaging with hard-to-reach customers to ensure they can still access services given the Council's digital default approach. This is something that deeply concerns me, not just about this council, but across corporations everywhere, where people who aren't digitally able are being excluded. And even those who are being excluded by the digital wall thrown up around some corporations. I mean, I've spent the last 5 months trying to get a BT fibre installed at Potters Mead, and we've had 16 bookings and cancellations, and you can't contact anybody. And I don't want to see Tunbridge and Malling go that way. We must always have some way of ordinary people accessing a person. Thank you.
Absolutely right. Actually, what I would say, in fairness to the auditors, is that it's good that they're monitoring this sort of thing, actually, holding our feet to the fire, because balance to be struck between being accessible and actually moving with times and particularly as the younger generation come through, start using their services, paying council tax. This is easier for younger people to contact it differently. Apps on their phone for everything. Yet at the same time, nothing beats that personal interaction. So you've got to do both, really. And yeah, it's good that the auditors are monitoring this, not just for us, but other councils. So I completely agree, Mike. Right. Sorry. Page 231 has got 2 recommendations all related to Annex 1. I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder, please? Martin? Great. Can we agree that collectively? Thank you very much. Right. We now move on to our matters for information. It's agenda item 13, minutes of panels, boards and other groups. So we have minutes from the Parish Partnership Panel on the 29th of August, minutes of the Tunbridge Community Forum on the 2nd of September. We've got minutes from the Joint Transportation Board on the 16th of September. Can we note those minutes? Thank you very much. We now come on to item 14, which is decisions taken by Cabinet members. I will, excluding those that have been discussed at committee, I'll just run through the decisions that have been taken by Cabinet members since our last meeting in September. If you can just explain the nature of the decision taken when I call your name, Cabinet members, and if any member who isn't in Cabinet wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet member, please stick your physical or virtual hand up. So again, from page 259, leaving aside those discussed at our last meeting, the first one was by Kim Tanner in relation to the extension of agile management arrangements and funding. Kim.
Thank you. Yeah, this was really to keep our business change project manager in place until the project comes to not a final finish, but you know, all implementation is carried out, and so the lady in place will be staying with us until March 25, just to ensure the smooth running of the final stages of bringing agile in. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. The next one was response to the NPPF consultation, but that was discussed by committee, so not much further to add yet. Another one of Kim's, customer contact centre enhanced facilities.
This was to bring in an auto web chat for our council to enhance the facility that we provide. Customer services have up until this point been providing a manual service as a web chat, but now it's automated. We hope to see great benefits for our residents, and it's 24-hour answer service.
Thank you very much. Kim, just turning the page. Robin, do you want to cover the next 2? They are the Tunbridge Castle Gatehouse route repairs, approval of tender route, and amendments to the Sainsbury's Tunbridge store lease.
Yeah, of course. The procurement route for the repairs to the Tunbridge Castle Gatehouse, I think, as the report notes, is a straightforward procurement route. The Sainsbury's one, a little bit more interesting in the fact that we're amending the lease to enable Sainsbury's then now to move into Bills at last, a store next to them, and of course substantial investment in that, which I think will benefit the area of Tunbridge significantly. And to the tune of that also, we get money back from that as well, to the tune of £250,000. Simple as that, really. Thank you.
Excellent news. Thank you, Robin. And Kim, do you want to cover the last 3 for discretionary rate relief, reduction in council tax liability and debts to write-off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. The discretionary rate relief was awarded to a charity who already has rate relief on their original building. This was the second building that they required in Tunbridge, and a 20% discount has been awarded. The reduction in council tax liability, this was refused, really gave it careful consideration, and I'm afraid in line with our policies, I wasn't able to award that. And debts for write-off, these are inevitable debts that we have to write off, really because you know, we've explored all avenues of getting the debt back, and in most of these cases it was impossible because of death, bankruptcy, and company that became insolvent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, so thank you all for your decisions. Right, moving on to agenda item 15. This is a notice of forthcoming key decisions to be taken by Cabinet during November and December, which we have discussed tonight, some we will discuss next month, and also just draw attention to members to the updated list that was published. Right, agenda item 16 is urgent items. There aren't any. Therefore, I move to agenda item 17. I do regret to inform anyone watching on YouTube that this is the moment in which we have to very politely kick you out of the meeting and end the stream, as we have some matters that must be discussed in private, since they may disclose financial or business affairs of a particular person. So if I can thank you for watching and ask Katie to let us know once the YouTube stream has